Sony launched the new A9 III. So naturally, Tony and I are asking, what's next?
I think it could be huge. First, global shutters unlock a lot of potential for future cameras, but also it frees up some time because they won the camera wars, right? You can't go any faster than 0 millisecond readout speed. So now all that engineering time can be put into something else.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about what the global shutter means for photography and camera, the future of cameras, and then also what we want to see paired with this new technology, because of course we're always wanting more. We can't be satisfied. We're always excited about the future of camera tech. But first we want to talk about our sponsor, Squarespace, because they make professional websites easy, pleasing to look at, and accessible for everyone. If you have your own business, like a restaurant, a doctor's office, a store, make sure you try your own Squarespace website. It's super easy. If you can drag and drop, you can make it happen. You can book appointments, you can sell things.
Get your own custom domain, get found on Google, finally. It all starts at squarespace.com/Chelsea, where you'll get a free trial. You can see just how great it is. And then after your trial, use the coupon code Chelsea and it will save you 10% off. Thank you, Squarespace.
It also makes a great gift. I've gotten Squarespaces for people and started to set them up so that they could sell their art, things like that, so check it out. All right, let's first talk about the global shutter. I'm sure you've seen a bunch on the reviews already, but let's just generally tell them what that is, what it means.
Digital sensors read out over some period of time. Sometimes it's like 1/10 of a second. Sometimes it's like 0.03 seconds, but motion can happen in that period of time, which means you could get rolling shutter, which straight lines become tilted lines. It also limits the amount of frames per second that you could have. So Sony announced the first traditional still camera with a global shutter, and it unlocked unlimited sync speeds with flashes. It unlocked 0 rolling shutter, completely defeated, and 120 frames per second, like full readout RAW files, which is outrageous.
So they've been chasing all these specs for a long time. You know, the frames...
Like since the 50s,
yeah,
they've been fighting over these things.
Frames per second, remember it was like 4, then 5, then 8, then 12 is a lot, 15, then 20 seemed insane, 30, I thought, what are we gonna do with 30? And then now we have 120.
I don't want more, that's fine. We shoot action, wildlife all the time. I've been an advocate for higher frames per second, and I found myself shooting 120 frames per second being like, oh, I don't need any more. Like, this is enough forever. It's like we're now at the limit of the speeds of human athletes, of the fastest animals. Like I see very limited need for anything north of 120 frames per second. I declare the war over and won. Please do not go to 240 frames per second. I don't need 1,000 frames per second. Stop, let's move on to the next thing.
Tony, I think that actually you're being a little narrow-minded here. What if we had 500 frames per second?
Too much. The shutter sync speed war, the readout speed war, these things are done.
This is a symbolic mic drop for Sony, because if all the manufacturers have been chasing each other, they just said, boom, we did it. You can't get faster than instantaneous. What are you gonna do now? Clearly, they also have to chase them and come out with a global shutter so that they can have the same tech. But I think that why it really matters for Sony, aside from the fact that you get these cool features on your camera, is that it's a moon landing-like moment. You prove that you can do something larger than life, but I also think that it's symbolic of the fact that we have a whole new frontier of photography to explore. It opens up a bunch of new opportunities, like more tech, better sensors for everyone, not only in other camera manufacturers, but in our phones, which opens the doors for computational photography and AI photography in camera.
Right, and as well as for cinematographers. I think the people who benefit the most are going to be the filmmakers, who no longer have to have the annoying tilty lines when they do whip pans, which you see even in major motion pictures now. Global shutters at this price point should completely solve that.
So even if you don't want an A9 III, even if you think the frame rate doesn't matter, or then none of this matters for you, I guarantee you it does, because this is dictating a whole new level of camera development that's coming our way, which made me wonder, why now? And that might seem like a silly question, because you're like, because they finished it. They were working on this global shutter for a while, now it's done. But the thing is, this event was very early. It's 6 months until the camera actually comes out.
Unheard of for Sony.
They also didn't give us access to the raw files, which they usually do. They usually give us the software so we can, at least the reviewers can kind of review what's going on. And so I felt like this was early, and I was speculating a few different reasons why that could be. One, they just wanted to get the announcement in before the holiday season, so people shopping for new cameras, maybe they budgeted all year for something big.
They're thinking about a Z8, and Sony's
Yeah.
like, no, hold on, we got something better for you.
Yeah, I think that's possible. Just kind of like, whoa, hold on to your dollars. Sony just came up with something cool. I think it's also very possible that they wanted this big announcement for the Olympics, and they wanted to get this camera in the hands of the photographers at the Olympics. When we just did our most recent podcast, we talked a lot about the history of the Olympics for camera manufacturers. One of the things is that Canon's always bragging that they have the biggest presence at the Olympics. This is symbolic for these camera companies. If they have the largest presence at the Olympics, they can say, this is the brand the pros use. And I think that Sony wants to steal their spot as number one. And so it's possible things were just pushed out kind of early to get it into the hands of the photographers before everything leaked and make sure they had time to practice. I don't really know. Maybe there's something else going on.
So let's talk about what's next. And this is going to be what we think is going to happen, but also kind of a wish list that probably won't happen. What I think is actually going to happen next is going to be overcoming the limitations of the Sony A9 III. Everybody's kind of in a tizzy because the base ISO is 250 and the dynamic range is reduced and the high ISO performance is probably reduced, though we didn't get a chance to test those things. I bet Sony will improve the quality of those sensors, reduce the base ISO, and I bet they'll do an A1 with a global shutter that has 50 megapixels. The traditional things, making the numbers bigger, right?
I do still appreciate the bigger numbers. I'm not going to lie, but our wish list does get a little bit more complicated because when you introduce something like a frame rate of 120 frames per second, you're also introducing another set of, I'll call problems, good problems to have. But if you have 120 frames per second, you have so many more photos to go through.
Well, at the event, we shot for what, 2 hours? We had 10,000 photos. And we were not shooting continuously, not even like I would have at a sports game. That's how many photos you rack up. And then I had to import them into Lightroom and let it render previews overnight, which becomes an unacceptable workflow, right?
Well, they do have an option where you can watch back your burst like a movie and then scrub through and find the best frame. So they have considered the workflow, and I think that that's a pretty decent option. But I think it could be more intelligent. When you take a picture with live view on your iPhone, it kind of just like automatically picks the best picture for you, or what it thinks is the best. And I don't see any reason why Sony or other camera manufacturers couldn't do something like that. You do 120 frames per second, but then the camera chooses pretty much what they think the best one is, and then that streamlines the workflow. You only need to see one.
Yeah.
If you say, I don't think this is right, you can go through and see if there's another better one. But we don't need to go through a bunch of pictures.
And Sony did a big step. They gave us a separate button that puts the camera into turbo mode, basically. So you will normally shoot at 30 frames per second, and then you can push the turbo mode and go to 60 or 120 frames per second. So you're not constantly forced to use the same frame rate like you are on every other sports camera in the world. And that's a step in the right direction, but you had a better idea.
I won't say it's better, but I think I want it more.
It's better.
Actually, I misunderstood. I thought they already had it, which is a shutter button. You know when you press your shutter button halfway and it autofocuses and you press it the rest of the way and it takes the picture? I was thinking like you press it halfway and it's 30 frames per second or whatever you program. You press it all the way and it's 120 frames. I actually thought they had that at the event. I just misread one of the charts.
I do think the shutter button should work as a gas pedal. I think you should press it lightly and it's going to be 5 frames per second, push it more, and it's 20, push it all the way, like as you would if you were excited about a moment, and it will go all the way into 120 frames per second.
You can't do
Show
that.
me a little gauge or make it audible. Why can't you do that?
You can't press down harder when you're excited, Tony. You have to control yourself as a wildlife photographer.
I do not. I can still get excited when a bird pulls a fish out of the water.
You have to be like a Marine, control your breathing, control your shutter finger, and we'll work on that if Sony works on the shutter as a gas pedal thing.
Something that'll never happen, but could happen, is intelligently tracking the subjects and adjusting the frames per second dynamically. So Sony shows off their AI tech, and it can track your arms and the motion of the hands, and somebody goes in for the alley-oop and does something.
Ooh.
When the camera detects moments of high motion, give me a higher frames per second. When somebody's just standing there for a portrait, give me a lower frames per second. Adjust the frames per second, and even the shutter speed dynamically to the motion of the subject, because a sports photographer, a wildlife photographer has plenty to think about. People are like, oh, it makes it too easy. No, it's still really hard to get on the sidelines, to capture the moment, to anticipate the action. You have plenty to do.
When we have these fantastical ideas, people do say, oh, you don't need that. But remember when we didn't have auto white balance and that was a pain?
Yeah, or even autofocus.
Yeah, or autofocus or IAF, and everyone said you don't need that. Like, imagine if it would just detect speed. So if I'm running, it'd be like 1/30,000 frames per second. But if you were running, it could just be 5 frames per second, like an old DSLR.
Yeah. I also have a major beef with this aspect of camera tech.
What?
Every time they add new tech, the cameras become more complex. If you look at one of the most successful companies in the world, Apple, every time they introduced new tech, it became simpler to use. What I want to see is simpler autofocus. They now have subject detection for autofocus, but you have to manually go in and select person, car, train, bird. And if you forget, your camera doesn't autofocus. So we switch between portraits and wildlife all the time. And all the time I forget that I need to go into the menus and change the subject that it's detecting until I've missed a few shots. And I'm like, oh yeah.
And I know I feel like I am hard on myself and I'll be like, well, I should just be able to remember. But reducing friction and accounting for human error is something that makes good tech great, because you don't want friction when you're dealing with tech, right? You don't want the tech where someone has to call their nephew that works at Best Buy to come figure it out. You want the tech where anyone can figure out how it works and it's a pleasant experience. So
yeah, it's always hard. Like, the challenge of photography should be composition, storytelling, lighting. It should not be getting the right camera settings. That's not the challenge of photography. So give me automatic subject detection. If you can spot the eye on a butterfly and focus on it, then you can figure out whether you want to focus on a person or a butterfly, and you're not going to have the two in the same scene. But if you do, then prioritize them and just handle that for me automatically.
This could get insulting. What if it detected me as a bird or a dog? And then you have to sit me down and just say, you don't look like a human, Chelsea. It's not for you.
The camera manufacturers so far, they've been competing with each other.
Yeah,
like,
they have
it's Sony versus Canon versus Nikon.
I know. It's exciting though.
But here's the thing, somebody came along and took away 96% of their market share. It's the smartphones. And that happened about a decade ago, that we've been falling from that high peak. And that means for the last decade, almost everybody is taking pictures and they're learning on their smartphones. There's a whole generation of people who've never picked up a traditional camera. And we find that when they do switch from their smartphones to a traditional camera, it's a really harsh transition. And they aren't likely to keep using the camera. They might even buy a camera, they'll use it a couple of times, and then they get hung up on something and they stop using it. We think camera manufacturers can fight back against the smartphone manufacturers by improving their tech, largely using the powers unlocked by the new global sensors. And we're going to talk about that after we thank our sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace.com/Chelsea is where you start with a real website, something better than social media. You can get your own custom domain. Like, I have northropphotography.com, you're chelseanorthrop.com. Think of what your domain name could be. People can then email you there, and it can come up at the top of search results for the key phrases that you want, which might be a photographer for your area, or just you because you want to show off your photo and your video reels. You can set up a store, take appointments from clients. It all starts at squarespace.com/Chelsea. Try it out, no credit card required. When you love it, the coupon code Chelsea gets you 10% off.
Speaking of painless tech, really anyone could set up a Squarespace. It's super easy.
Yeah, I wish the camera manufacturers could make it so easy.
Well, their job is a little more complex, I think, but still, it's an easy way to make your business look professional. And don't forget to use my coupon code and spell my name right. It's CHELSEA. People always just put in your name, I think, because it's easier to spell.
And then, are that lazy.
But then the podcast doesn't get credit. So if you're supporting the podcast, you have to use that coupon code. Okay, let's get back into our topic, which is how this global shutter could lead to even greater tech in other aspects, one of them being computational photography. And if you're wondering how those two things are related, well, it has to do with that instantaneous readout. So if you can instantly read out a picture, you can stack pictures more seamlessly, leading to things like unlimited dynamic range. Imagine it taking a picture that's exposed very darkly and one that has all the highlights and smushing them together we really could get some amazing pictures coming at us.
The A9 Mark III could take 12 photos in 1/10 of a second. So you could snap a portrait and it could stack the images for dynamic range, make sure that the sky is not clipped at all. It could check each of those images to make sure the eyes are open, the mouth is in a smile, and pick the one that's best, and then blend all those images together to give you the equivalent of ISO 20, even if it's limited to ISO 250, which means like completely noise-free skin tones, completely perfect skies and out of focus backgrounds. That's all possible just with image stacking and a little bit of intelligence. And every modern smartphone does this. If we could get that tech into cameras, think of the power that we'd have.
I could be so powerful. My pictures could be so smooth.
And this is very personal to me as a photographer and a videographer. I desperately need better quality screens on my camera. I find it so upsetting that my $6,500 Sony A1 has a screen that I can't see in the sun. But my iPhone works perfectly. My $500 DJI Pocket 3, I can see that screen in the sun, but not on my $6,500 A1. And it's not a Sony problem. The Canon, the Nikon, Olympus, Panasonic, every single one of these cameras has a screen you cannot see in sunlight. We need brighter screens, we need bigger screens, and we need sharper screens.
Well, yeah, right now we use our phones as our field monitors just because we can see the screen while we're filming.
Which is crazy, right? We go through so much extra complexity because otherwise we found we were like missing focus or stuff because you just can't see it.
That's not related to the global shutter. We're just throwing things out there now.
Yeah, well, this is my wish list, but all those people that were working on the global shutter, they're bored now. They don't know what to, like, okay, we did it, we won, they high five, now get back to work. And this is specific to Sony, but when I go and review videos on my Canon, Nikon, DJI camera, I scrub through. I make sure that everything's sharp, that I have sound at the beginning and end. On the Sonys, I have to use little VCR controls. You know, it's like you press fast forward once and it goes 2 times speed, you press it again, it goes 4 times speed.
Yeah.
Now imagine waiting for a half-hour video to try to get to the end to make sure you recorded it correctly. As a result, I don't do that, and sometimes I get back and I find out it didn't work and it's too late to retake it. Sony, can you please just let me scrub video? I tried it on the A9 Mark III, the brand new camera. You can't scrub video. You can't drag it along.
Oh, I thought that you could.
No, they didn't fix it. I tested it.
Oh.
Even though it wasn't a video camera. I just was hoping.
You were just hoping.
You're very dashed.
You are very hopeful and optimistic about the future of camera tech. And I like that about you.
What about the menu systems? Have you ever run into a time when you needed to change a setting and you couldn't find it in the menu systems?
Well, yeah. And you know, though, actually, I've kind of figured out the way all menu systems work. I try to use all different camera brands, and they all have their quirks and different names for the same features and things like that. So I'm comfortable with the menus, including all of their quirks. But what worries me is people new to photography coming in and things aren't as intuitive as other tech that people are used to. So I still would like to see menus improved on all brands, not just Sony. I feel like Hasselblad had a good one. They had something
Hasselblad did it right. It's so intuitive, so straightforward, and you don't have to read the manual.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good direction to go in. I think it gets difficult, the menus, when you have all of these features, because the cameras now are just so high-tech. They have so many features. One thing that happens to me that still confuses me is that if I have one feature selected, I won't be able to use another one, and I have to figure out what that is and then turn off this other feature before I turn on another one.
Well, here's an example. Canon R5, if you use the electronic shutter and then you go to take a picture in the studio with a strobe,
oh, yeah.
it simply won't fire the flash. And we have spent 10 minutes trying to figure out why, and it's because you have to manually go in and turn on mechanical shutter. Like, that could be and should be automatic. On the A9 Mark III, I tried to use a longer shutter speed, and I got to 1/8 of a second, and I couldn't go any slower. And it gave me no feedback, it just stopped working. And I realized I had to go in and turn off the pre-shot buffering, and then it would allow me. But we need better user interfaces, we need to simplify things. Like, go ahead and just turn that off when I want to go below 1/8 of a second, and then turn it back on. When I connect a strobe to my Canon, go ahead and switch to the mechanical shutter. Like, these things can be simplified and automated so that we don't have to dig into the menus.
I have seen cameras where they'll throw up a warning and be like, you can't do that with this other feature on. But then you have to go into the menu and actually turn it off. So
still a step in the right direction.
Yeah, true.
I also desperately want better connectivity. Wi-Fi on all cameras is really, really bad, but it doesn't have to be. Like, we filmed the Sony A9 III event with a DJI Pocket 3, a $500 camera, because I knew I needed to turn it around quickly, and I could use very high-speed Wi-Fi on this DJI device to get it to my phone, and that allowed me to be one of the first people to publish the early
Then
review.
why did everyone say we were late?
Still not fast enough,
Oh.
but faster than I could have gotten with any Canon, Nikon, or Sony. The A9 III's Wi-Fi is from 2019. It's Wi-Fi 5, but there's Wi-Fi 6 out now that is an order of magnitude faster. Same thing with the Bluetooth. It's Bluetooth 5.0 from 2016. They need a way to stay current on these things because connectivity in the modern world is one of the most important features for cameras.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that they also need to add cellular. We're able to connect to all of our other devices. I don't understand why my camera isn't the same as all of the other tech around me. Mm-hmm. It makes it seem separated from all other tech in general.
And I know people are going to say, oh, that would compromise the waterproofing, it would drain the battery too much, it would cost too much, but my watch here has cellular and Wi-Fi and GPS. The battery lasts multiple days, and it literally fits into a watch. So if they can put this into a watch, they could certainly put it into my big old Sony A9 III for $6,000, right?
Maybe. I don't know what it looks like in there.
And then once we have this platform to actually transfer files, like give me the software I need to actually send it automatically to my phone, to my computer, to Google Drive, or to my network attached storage.
I think wireless transfer is key to getting more people to stay in the systems. And I've seen this time and time again where I have advised people to buy cameras, they buy them and then they're not taking pictures. And when I ask them why, well, sometimes it's the menus. They'll be like, I don't know what happened to my camera. This thing was selected and so I just don't use my camera anymore. Like literally, you lose a customer ever buying another lens or another thing from you because something was too complicated. But another thing is that they can't wirelessly transfer their photos, so they leave them on their camera, and then they may as well not exist.
Yeah, and okay, theoretically you could wirelessly transfer your photos, but when we test it out, we find the process of using the app is difficult, slow, and unreliable.
Well, yeah, very
And those
unreliable.
are things that can be fixed.
All right, we need a wireless mic and headphones as well. They just need to make that system they know what we're doing with the stuff.
Sony makes wireless microphones. That means you know how to send and receive stuff in real time, but you made me like put an extra thing in the hot shoe, and then I have to actually wire in my headphones. Like, give me a true wireless system.
Yeah.
You should not be using any kind of wires in 2023. The DJI Osmo built the wireless receiver into the tiny little camera, so you could put it in your $6,500 camera for sure.
Can you imagine what their camera would look like when they're done adding all the stuff we want? It's going to be this big.
I don't think so.
You're going to be the only person that buys it. You'll probably wait till it's on sale.
Manufacturers are giving us more firmware updates now. They're rolling out
that.
new features. I am thrilled by that, but the process is still antiquated. The process should work as well as it does on my watch, on my phone, on my computer, on my car. I should get a notification that says, new update, do you want it? And I say, yes. Connect these things to the internet. Do not make me like connect a USB cable to my camera on my PC. And
I'm just laughing because you get the update thing and you say yes. And I
you always say no. It's still not easy enough for you. You'll never get Chelsea to update anything.
I just wait till you come shame me.
Yeah. Or you're like, my computer got hacked again. What happened?
My computer has never been hacked. Ever. What happens is you walk over and you say, how do you work with that pop-up? Harassing the hell out of you. And I'm just like, I can ignore anything, baby.
For 2 hours while I install a series of updates and rescue your computer. I want GPS because I like to see my photos on a map that helps me identify them. It's useful for professionals, for amateurs, everybody. It's inexpensive, it's possible.
I want anti-theft technology because everybody I know keeps getting mugged, and we should deal with that.
Yeah, we had a friend of ours almost killed. He was shot at.
True. That's not funny.
It's not funny, but photographers are targeted because the devices are high value. You can take them and there's no tracking, and then you could sell it online. You could sell it to a pawn shop, and there's no way to track it back.
Why
to the
won't they
original
do this
owner.
one? I don't understand.
They just won't.
We
And
did
I know
a
in
whole
the comments we're
campaign.
going to have people being like, "Oh, I don't want to have to log into my camera, but you already log into your smartphone 100 times a day. Every time you pick up your smartphone, you authenticate yourself. Your car, your house, everything has some level of security built in, except for these very expensive devices. And for me personally, like when we went to Italy, I often left my camera behind because I knew I would be a target of theft. It wasn't Italy specifically, but any big city
Just the
has
world.
this problem.
Yeah.
If we build anti-theft in, it's not going to eliminate theft, but it will make cameras a less attractive target, and that will make people more likely to use them, and they'll get more benefit from them.
Plus, you don't have any privacy anyway. That's an illusion. Now that
Just give up on that.
Just give up on that. How do you think they caught that killer? 23andMe already has your DNA, so just give up.
Well, speaking of privacy, I think the photos that we take on our cameras should remain private. But right now, if somebody steals your camera, they also get all your photos. And you could be coming from a boudoir shoot. You could be coming from an embargoed product that was about to be released, the next new Nike sneaker that was going to be huge. You might have pictures on it.
You might be coming from a crime scene.
Right.
And you have forensic evidence on your camera.
And sometimes the pictures are far more valuable than the camera itself. And if the thief gets those pictures, which they will because there's no security, they could blackmail you, they could blackmail the organization, they could ruin your reputation just by having access to those confidential files. So like we need an encryption system. Like every smartphone, every computer has, of course, we need a way to encrypt our files.
You think of all the scary stuff. Okay.
One last thing. This is something that's actually happening. Sony is rolling out a firmware update to the A9 III and the A1 that will provide what they call C2PA, which is integrity.
And that's the same system that Leica is using too. So this is multiple manufacturers saying this is a problem we anticipate that we need to fix.
Right, and this is kind of the fight against AI. This will allow people to verify that an image was taken with a real camera, like it's a real image, as well as to track all the edits that are made thereafter. So I am really glad to see them starting to move in this direction. There's a lot of more progress that needs to be made. Like first they need to actually roll it out.
Yeah.
But I think camera manufacturers are the ones who need to lead this effort because they're the ones who will profit from it most.
They're also the ones who stand to lose the most because if authenticating photos doesn't matter, photos don't matter, and cameras don't matter, so.
Yeah. I think this needs to go from professional press level where it is now down to the consumer level because think how social media will change once you can get a little check mark on your images showing that they're a real image and not something AI generated.
Yeah, I like that idea, just authentication being the standard. Okay, that is our wish list. Tell us how you feel. Is there anything else you'd like to see in camera tech? Are you excited about the A9 III and the global shutter and what that means for camera tech in general? We want to know your thoughts, your feelings, your predictions.
I predict a lot of people are going to be getting a Squarespace website because they're just tired of relying on social media. I know I am. I've had to hop from one social media network to another one. You need a permanent home on the web. Like I have northropphotography.com that has been on Squarespace for like almost a decade now and will be there forever because it works so smoothly. I never have to worry about updates. It's never crashed that I know of. It just keeps working. I get to just focus on taking my pictures. And when I take a good picture, I go and I update it. And that feels magical to me. They deal with all the complexity of web hosting and making sure it works on computers, phones, tablets to make sure that the hackers are fought off. They're amazing at this.
Yeah, they are. They make selling prints easy too. I got to sell prints. And they also make other businesses, if you don't want to do a photo website, a lot easier. We just did a cooking class and I found that on a restaurant's website and I would not have found it otherwise.
Yeah, you wouldn't see that on social
media. It actually was on their social media. It got buried, but it was because I went on their website that I found out more about them. So make sure all of your most important information is organized on your website. It's professional and it's easy to make. Go to squarespace.com/Chelsea and use the coupon code Chelsea to get 10% off. That's CHELSEA. Thanks so much for watching the Picture This Photography podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.